Hello, hello, lovely people of the interwebs. How are we all? It's I don't freaking know. 29th, I think it's the Friday. It's that tricky period between Christmas and New Year, the perineum of the festive period. Hope you're all right. My name's Heidi Mavir. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the founder of EOTAS Matters. I'm also the author of Your Child Is Not Broken, Parent Your Neurodivergent Child Without Losing Your Marbles. Can't find a copy. Ridiculously, there are a million copies kicking about in my house. When our guest comes on, she can wave her copy at us. She had it in her hand a minute ago. There's some under my desk anyway, but anyway, whatever. I don't know if I mentioned I wrote a book. This is my first official day back in work since before Christmas, hence the pajamas. I'm not sorry. They are Christmas pajamas and they're brand new and they're very they're loungewear really. So I'm bringing a guest to you today. An incredible new book came out just before Christmas. Let me know if you're watching live, by the way. Drop me a hello in the comments so I can see where you are and where you're watching from. And if you want to give this a cheeky little share, that would be lush. Also, we are broadcasting into Facebook and also onto YouTube today. I know, posh. I haven't brushed my hair. I haven't got a bra on. Rock and roll. This book came out just before Christmas. And hello, Facebook user. If you're getting that, that's because you need to give permission at the top for StreamYard to see your name. Hello, Claire. Hello, Emma. Emma, did you send me your address? You won a prize, didn't you? Hello, Sarah. Nice to see you all. Oh, lovely. We've got lots of lovely people here with us today. I don't know about you, but I am desperate for some grown-up conversation. It's Kate in London. Hi, Kate in London. I have spent the last week just chilling kind of ish, but Christmasing, which is not really chill when you're a neurodivergent person. We might talk about that today. But also I am desperate to geek out about my special interest because I've had no one to talk to about autism and ADHD apart from Instagram, which has not been healthy, if I'm honest, over the past week. If you go and have a look, it's been 7 shades of shit over on my Instagram for the past week. So, by the way, I'm quite sweary. Hi, sorry if you've got your kids with you. I apologize. Maybe your kids are PDA and they think that's hilarious. Anyway, whatever. This is for you, PDAers. So, nice to see you all. Welcome. So, this book by Helen Daniel, which is called Neurosensory Divergence, Autistic Languages, a roadmap to an equitable life for autistic children. And it's freaking brilliant. My copy arrived yesterday. I've done a bit of a scan through and a bit of a dive into a couple of chapters, and it's cracking. So Helen has come to talk to us today. Helen is a trained teacher. She's also got a master's in autism, and she'll tell us something autism. And she is a late identified neurodivergent adult herself. So I'm going to get her in and we're going to have a bit of a chat. And do join in the comments. Mazza's in the Isle of Wight. There you go. That's very glamorous. Right. So let's get her in, do a drum roll and then an applause and all of that. Hello. And also this, which is ruining my background entirely. This is now my office is now the home to our tortoise because it's too cold in my son's bedroom. So it's ruining the aesthetic, but he's very cute. So we live with that. So yeah, we've got people joining us all the time on the live. Amazing. Look at all these people with nothing to do between Christmas and New Year. 40 people. I'm really glad you're here. I don't mean to be offensive, but I too am desperate for proper adult interaction. So in keeping with that, good evening, good afternoon. Hello, Helen. Another proper adult, apparently.
I know, apparently. I don't think we ever feel like full adults. I don't.
I know. So before we came live, I asked you a couple of things and you were like, and I was like, I'm just going to keep it. I'm just going to ask you when we come live. So let's do a quick little skip around. Your book came out, what date? 7th of November, was it? Something like that?
14th. 14th of December.
Oh, okay. We're miles off. Okay, cool. And tell me a bit about the book. What is it? Why did you write it? Give me that.
Okay. So when I was studying my master's, at the same time we had lockdown just around that time, and I had been a teacher before lockdown, and then I began studying my master's, and I knew that I had neurodivergent people in my family, and I began to notice that they were picking up patterns of learning that weren't typical. So where, as a teacher, I was thinking, wow, I'm just some kind of amazing teacher. They are just taking this information in like a sponge. Some of them were like amazing readers. And I was just thinking, wow, oh, brilliant at picking up numbers and things like that. And then as time went on, I noticed that they were picking up on sensory information that was different to the expected. And their sensory systems were much more turned up. And they were just learning in a way that was different. And when I was then studying my master's at the same time, I started to realize that the way we teach in classrooms is very strictly associated with a certain type of learning, a certain type of brain, and for me, a certain type of sensory system. And I really started to home in on these sensory systems because I was like, well, the way we take in information, if it's different, we're going to be learning things that are different. And therefore, being in a conventional classroom, you're not going to be accessing the information as easily.
Yeah.
And the big thing for me was I was able to see one of my neurodivergent family members at school and then at home. So in their home environment and in their school environment. And in their school environment, they presented with situational mutism. But in the home environment, they didn't. And so I started to realize that there was something going on with their sensory system and they were not accessing speech in the same way as other children. And then when I was studying for my master's, Donna Williams has written an amazing book called Nobody Nowhere. And in that, she said that she only heard words as mumbling jumble. And that made me think, hold on, she's picking up speech in a completely different way. And all of this fed into this idea that we have these neurodivergent languages. And that's what really fed into my book. So, yeah.
That's me misspelling nobody in quite a spectacular fashion. Nobody, where, oh my Christ. If I was half as efficient on the outside of my brain as I am on the inside of my brain, I'd be dangerous. Nobody, nowhere. There we go. So what's really interesting about this for me is that we have lots of conversations, don't we, about neurodivergent people not being able to access things because, you know, the environment isn't built for us and, you know, our sensory system is overwhelmed. And we talk about, you know, sensory dysregulation and emotional dysregulation in classrooms quite a lot in our community, especially in my community where we're supporting a lot of families who have children or young people with barriers to attendance. But the thing that I think is really interesting is that what you're saying is that we know that neurodivergent people have a difference in communication, but what you're saying is that knowing that and using that to inform the way we teach will make the classroom more accessible for everyone in that classroom. That's what you're saying, right?
So if a child is experiencing the sensory world turned up, and in my book, there is research that shows that some autistic people have been shown to have higher acuity, so hear more, see in detail, hear in detail. You're in a classroom, so a chair moves, a bird sings, a chair moves, a bird sings, there's wires buzzing, etc. Then all of that noise, I call that sensory abundance. At the moment, we call that sensory disorder. And I'm saying it's not a disorder, it's a difference. It means we home in on different patterns. So if you're not able to access speech because the world is turned up louder, you still have to access communication. You still have to access learning, but it will look different. So for example, if a child doesn't pick up on verbal speech, they might pick up on the written code first. And we have lots of autistic children who are early readers. If they don't pick up on it, they pick up on the visual code first. And so a lot of our children, and one thing that I love that I've written in the book is, so if you're a visual learner and you're not speaking, you still will be doing the human thing of looking, learning, repeating that pattern. We have patterns all over the place that humans create in the way we build buildings, the way we park our cars, the way we plant our plants, like everything. There's patterns everywhere. So children who are non-speaking, who are looking around at the world, they're going to recreate those patterns. They're going to line things up. They're going to color code things. They're going to show you what they're learning. It's meaningful. And the problem is we've moved so far away from thinking of autistic and neurodivergent traits as meaningful that it's massively problematic for our children that are in classrooms and they're like, I learn this way. This is how I need to learn. And you're not teaching me that way.
Yeah. Oh my God. See, when you say that, I just think back to when I was in school. You know, as you know, I'm late identified autistic ADHD, as are you, I believe. And, you know, I talk about this before, that there was no way I was ever going to get diagnosed as a kid, because when I was a child, many moons ago, people who spoke were never recognized as autistic. Like if you were a speaker, you weren't autistic. It was just not a thing. And I was extremely speaky. Like I was extremely speaky.
Yes.
I think I've got a bit of feedback on my end. So in classrooms, though, when I was overwhelmed, like for example, maths, massive challenge for me. Ironically, being that I am allegedly a pattern recognizer, but the way that I learn is not through visual learning. So the way that we were taught maths was looking at numbers on a board. It never made any sense to me at all. And I would like scribble on my paper whilst we were in class, but it was an aid to learning. So I would sometimes do things and I get told off for it. So I do things like, remember when you know this, when you're really young and you're using blocks to learn like fractions and stuff, I would quite often draw blocks on my piece of paper when we were in maths classes. And I would get in trouble for like messing up my paper, messing up the desk. I'd sometimes draw on the desk, sometimes draw on myself. I often drew on myself. And you saying that, I'm like, oh my God, that was literally me learning in a different way, like tapping into that sensory experience to be able to take in that input that just didn't make sense from what I was looking at.
100%. So one of the things so you could have been talking about me. So when my profile, I don't write about the ADHD profile in my book very much. There's a little bit on what I call hyperpolytropic brains. So we know autistic monotropic brains tend to. So Temple Grandin talks about the fact that she's a visual learner. Mm-hmm. And when you look in her brain, the visual cortex has much more connectivity. So our sensory system, the way we take in the information, so she's taking in visual information, it's making her visual cortex have more connectivity, and other areas will have less connectivity. And therefore, the way she learns, she has to take in speech, translate it into visual, and then translate it back again. Mm-hmm. And if you think in written words, then you'll be doing that, etc., etc. And that's very different to a typical person who's just taking in speech, memorizing it, can hold it in their brain, and then can put it back again and write it down and do it in tests, etc., etc.
Wow.
But my neurodivergent profile took me ages to unpick. I can unpick other people's because my thing is people watching and unpicking how people learn. I love that. That's my thing. Mm. So my profile is an emotional experience learner. I don't memorize in pictures. I don't memorize in written words. I don't particularly memorize in detail in spoken words. I can remember overarching concepts. So if I meet a person out of context, I won't remember their face because I don't remember visuals. I don't remember detailed visuals. I won't remember their face. And they can feel, people feel very upset if you don't remember them. And that's not my fault. It's not my sensory system. And then if they start speaking to me and we have connected about something emotional or experience, I will be like, oh, it's like I suddenly recognize them.
Yeah. Oh my God. I think memory and recall is really interesting because, for example, I really struggled to learn my times tables when I was a child. I don't struggle with numbers now, but I am the queen of spreadsheets. So that's what I found. I still can't do mental arithmetic, but I just ask Alexa or use the calculator on my phone. But I have learned how to use spreadsheets. So that's where I do all of my number crunching now. But it took me well into secondary to learn my times tables, and I still use cheats for my times tables. So I still use my fingers for my nines, 6 nines are 54. Like that's how...
I don't even do it. I don't even touch it. I don't touch it. I've married a mathematician and I am like, I'm not touching it.
Yeah, but stories I remember.
Yeah.
So I'm an experiential learner,
Yeah.
and I teach through that way too. So I'm a storyteller, and I'm a story hero. So I might not remember the detail of things, but if someone shares a story with me, I'll remember the emotion, and then I'll draw on the learning that I've got attached to that content. So that makes total sense to me.
So I feel like this is my next book, Experienced Emotional Learners. But there is nothing is set up in this world or in a classroom for experienced emotional learners. Nothing. Like they do emotional starters now at school, or they used to do it a little bit. But if you think about the way we've organised schooling, well, you know this, the pinnacle of education is memorising detailed patterns, grammar, spelling, maths, and it's become narrower and narrower and narrower till that is it. That is it. That is the pinnacle of things. And also inference. Oh, this is my bugbear. Right. Neurodivergent people, as children, we do not naturally use inference because we say things like they are, as they are.
So why would we trying to work out what someone else means or thinks? Because we expect them to just tell us.
And we are like, that's a useful bit of information for you. I don't like that present. That's a useful bit of information. You need that information so you don't buy me a present again. And then we get told, no, don't do that. That's rude. And we're
Very
like,
rude.
What? How is that rude? I personally think neurodivergent people communicate in a better way. Because we don't have
We're more efficient, if nothing else.
Say again.
We're more efficient, if nothing else.
But I think having these layers of information underneath as well is a memorizing thing.
Yeah.
So if you memorize in verbal, then you can hold those thoughts in your head. Oh, it's as children, when you're having, this is the other thing with communication, when children are learning to communicate with each other, and I remember this as a child, I remember thinking to myself, I'm not going to talk over people today. I'm going to wait. I'm going to just drop things into the conversation as I go. I'm going to be really good today. And you just can't help it because you can't speak to someone and hold what you want to say in your head at the same time.
No.
It will go.
Yeah.
That's why we info dump, because we're like, which is what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, my God. And I just think, and also like this thing of, the thinking of neurodivergent people are like this, typical people are like this. But, there are different learning styles across the whole human experience, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be doing typical children out of anything if we adopt these different approaches to learning, because we know that everyone has a different learning profile, right?
And I think the thing is with what happens at the moment, the reason I say, so with typical communication, we are taught everything around us is typical. So the movies, typical communication. the books we read will have a lot of typical experiences. There's not a lot of sensory experiences being discussed. We don't go into a classroom. So when you talk about, one of the things I talk about in the book is if you're in a classroom and a teacher says, imagine going down on a beach, how lovely it would be. That child's running on the beach and it's sunny and they're happy and they meet the other children and they're all really happy. Well, not all neurodivergent children, not all children are going to be having that experience. So we talk of an experience that is very specific when there's lots of children in that classroom that will be like, well, I don't like the sound. or I would rather be at the Sega building over there or doing some coding or whatever, you know. And we talk about typical experiences, and so one of the things that you spoke about before as well is that a really good thing that OTs can do with our children and young people is to talk about their sensory profiles. Mm-hmm. What feels good? What does it feel like when this happens? What does it feel like when that happens? And to validate those sensory experiences that they're having, because then they can go into the one of my family members goes into his classroom and is like, I'm just going to get up and shut the door because the fire alarm is outside and I don't think you've shut the door, and I'll just shut the door and then I'll come back to my seat and then everything's good. And he is able to advocate for himself because he talks the sensory profile all the time to his teachers.
Yeah. Whereas I'm with you on this one. If we could do anything, I'm just going to plug in. Give me a second. If we could do anything for our children and young people, and actually our educators, because let's be honest, it's not easy being a teacher. You know this. Teachers have an incredibly difficult job, and I don't believe for a second that anyone gets into teaching who is not really committed and passionate about doing right by kids. And I think that we let them down. We let teachers down by not giving them what they need to be able to do their job well. I'm just going to plug you in and see if this works because I've got a really bad echo. 1 second.
Okay. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me? Oh, no, I can't hear you now. Nope. Can't hear you. I can't hear you. I can't hear you now. Is it me?
I muted myself. And if that is the perfect example of what goes wrong when you try to communicate in a way that is not natural to you, I don't know what flipping is. Right, let's try it again. Hang on. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Can you hear me? Oh no. Why can't I hear you now? That doesn't make any sense. No. 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 I still can't hear you. Are you on mute?
I'm not now, without headphones.
Are we echoing to other people?
We're echoing to each other. I don't know if we're echoing to other
You're
people.
not echoing to me.
Okay, just me then. I'll get over it. Don't worry. Sorry, I just wasted like a full 2 minutes.
I was really worried that I was going to come on and be dotting about a lot with my information. I'm loving this.
Oh, hi, my name's Heidi and I'm ADHD and unmedicated. Can you tell? For fuck's sake. Anyway, what was I saying?
I don't know. Like two ADHD people are going to remember what we were talking about.
Let's just call it a day. Let's show each other our Christmas presents. I was saying, and then you were saying, and it was really interesting. And then I said, and it was a moment of genius. And then you said, and oh my God, we've changed.
Oh, I know what I want to say. So, right.
Go on, get us back on track.
If you've got neurodivergent brains and bodies, right? We're over here. There's like, I do think of it as a bit of a continuum. So you've got hyperpolytropic brains, where it's like our brains, where you've had to take in like multiple sensory information to access communication. And this really became apparent during lockdown when people were wearing masks.
Yes. Oh my God, yes.
Didn't know what they were saying, because I was having to use lip reading apparently, as well as what they were, their voices. So I was using my auditory and my visual. So that's one side. And then you've got more monotropic, where you're taking in loads of detail patterns. So you've got more Lego builders, coders, those sorts of things, right?
The useful autistics.
We've written some books.
We have written some books. I tell you what, a monotropic learner might not be able to write a book, because you need that. Well, they might. No, they probably could.
Yeah, I think we're overarching, but then we're also we have the hyper focus. We're like a bit of everything.
Yeah, all rolled into one. We're a big mishmash of. I remember what the thing was, but go on, keep talking.
So in classrooms, because we have these types of brains, like our brain over here is a bit like a pinball machine, and it's like bouncing around. We're very busy brains. Lots of electrochemical activity going on. Monotropic brains, all in one area. Lots of electrical chemical activity going on. We need to move our bodies more than typical polytropic type brains, because we have to process that through our bodies. Otherwise, it sits in there as anxiety.
Yeah.
And so we don't build that into our day at school, because the majority of children don't need that as much as we do. Neurodivergent brains and bodies need different things in our day.
I've remembered the thing, and it's freaking genius. Hold on to your hat. Okay, mainly because people in the comments told me what I was talking about. So thank you, people in the comments. Thank you, Jess, who was like, yes, and Joanne. So what I was remembering was, if I could like wave a magic wand and change the way, because people always say, what would you want educators to know? Like my book is about how when education can go horribly wrong, and the trauma of that. People say, what do you want teachers to know? What do you want educators to know? What do you want school leaders to know? And I think a lot of people would maybe expect me to say, I would like them to be trained in neurodivergence. I would like them to understand autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, Tourette's. That's not something I don't want people to know. But actually, I think more valuable than that would be if we trained our educators in two key things: understanding sensory profiles and the impact that has on all human beings, and understanding trauma profiles and the same thing. Because we know that our children who struggle in school are more likely to develop trauma responses to those stimulus, and that will more likely turn up the volume on their oversensitive sensory responses or dampen the volume on their undersensory sensory responses. And that will make it harder for them to engage in a learning environment. If we had educators who understood that and applied that to all people that they're training in, teaching in their classrooms, we would see a phenomenal difference in the outcomes for all learners, I believe. And if adults know about their own sensory profiles and their own triggers and their own trauma responses, that's helpful too.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And we did that this Christmas. We didn't stay with people as we normally do, because peopling and communicating is challenging. And then your sensory system is busy, and then all those other sensory things. And so building in those regulating activities, we don't have any downtime in schools, because when our neurodivergent children go into playgrounds, there's so many factors within a playground. There's the sensory. There's something that I talk about in the book called identity rejection. So when you are a divergent communicator, that can be rejected.
Yeah.
Because we pick up concepts differently and later often than our is typical, that can be rejected because we seem younger. The things we're interested in, because they're not the typical things, that can be rejected. The way we can sometimes be blunt, or all of those things, and it's a whole identity rejection of that child. And it's also when those children often say it can happen that when children say that's loud, that's smelly, that doesn't taste nice, they can be told no, that's all right,
it's fine,
because it is for that person, or for the majority of children it's okay. But if educators and society as a whole understood that sensory systems, it's not a disorder, it's a difference, and we can accommodate that and understand it 100%. I think that's what, and sensory access as well, the things that I'm talking about access to. So in a classroom, a teacher stands at the front and talks. If that's not your first language, what are you accessing? And what are you memorizing, and what are you taking away with you? And we don't talk about sensory access at all.
No, God. Even just things like, and then I've lost count of the number of parents who have told me that their child or young person, and actually even themselves as adults, have difficulties with auditory overwhelm. So it's something that's really common in neurodivergent people. Even those of us who are who might not consider it. For me, for example, a noisy pub environment, completely inaccessible for me, because it's overwhelming, but also I can't engage in conversation. I can't, even when I go into a cafe, I have to think about where the speaker is, because if I'm near a speaker or if I'm near the coffee machine, I won't be able to have a conversation with the person that I'm with, because I won't be able to hear them. And even if I'm lip reading, I won't be able to, it's all of that. And the number of children and young people who would benefit from being able to use noise cancelling ear defenders, for example, as a matter of course in a classroom.
Yeah.
And then we're told, well, we don't want to do that for them because they'll become reliant on them. And you can't do that in the real world. Says who? Why can't I wear noise cancelling ear defenders?
We should have more of that, so that it's normalised, and it's okay.
And also that, oh, well, if they need them, they can come and ask for them. I'll keep them on my desk. Imagine a classroom where we just had a handful of noise cancelling ear defenders and another basket of fidget toys in the middle of every desk, and kids could just choose them.
Oh, yes, 100%. The other thing that I find that I invested in, for one of my family members, for one of the children, a hearing device where the teacher wore a speaker,
like an induction loop thing.
Yeah, and he had earphones, and she said when she spoke, his eyes lit up. He looked, and he was smiling. He could hear, and I was like, "Why are we not using this generally?" So I spoke to an audiologist about it, and he said, "No, we don't want to do that with autistic children, because it could stop their ability to home into sounds. It could stop their I don't remember quite how he said it, but it could stop their ability to hear properly.
It'll stop their ears working."
I was like, but there are headphones that turn down background noise and home into voices. Autistic children who have auditory abundance would really benefit from this. And it was just no, that's not for autistic children.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I mean, even down to, I've got families who have children who have hearing impairments, and even just that, trying to get, BSL lessons for a particular child who the family I support, and they're profoundly deaf. They cannot get BSL lessons, because they don't want them to learn BSL, because how are they going to manage in the real world? Well, they're going to find people who speak BSL and they're going to be able to communicate clearly with them in a language that's comfortable for them. That's how.
And this, so I talk about this as well. I talk about, so we push speech and language a lot, and it's great for some children, and it has been great for family members, some of my family members. And when we're talking about neurodivergent languages, if a child picks up a neurodivergent language that is meaningful to them, they can then transfer that more easily to other languages. So for example, one of my family members picked up on the written code much earlier than the spoken code, and we couldn't believe that child was reading, but he was reading. And he was presenting with situational mutism, and I was in the school, so I was able to say, could you take him to a quiet place and have him read? Because they were like, he can't read. They assumed that he couldn't do all sorts of things because of his spoken.
Because he wasn't speaking as fluently. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And that has been continuous. People tend to underestimate children who don't use speech.
And adults.
And adults. They tend to underestimate what's happening, and yet humans are always learning. They might be learning different things. They're always learning. And when they took him to a quiet place and he read, I started to realize quiet is optimal for this child to learn. Mm-hmm. And we read to children when it's quiet. Mm-hmm. And so the other thing, we were talking about languages, so let me go back to that. We don't offer very many options for autistic children. So if a child is really tuned into music, we could put letters on a keyboard, you know? If they're really tuned into singing, we could use singing. Lots of neurodivergent people are really tuned into the poetic part of words, and they become poets, and we can use that. We're just very hemmed in on what we offer to autistic children. And now we know about these neurodivergent languages, we can start to really, explore different types of communication. Braille for touch-based children who learn about the world through touch.
Yeah.
We're not using a communication system.
It seems like some things we're kind of teetering on the edge of getting it. Like, I think about how, for example, I still am able to remember a song that I was taught in school as a way of remembering a particular thing, right? I'm not going to treat you to it right now. No, I'm not going to, because I'll mess it up and it'll be a holy mess. But it's a way to remember a sequence of things. And we do that with the alphabet, right? We teach kids to learn the alphabet by singing it. Or we teach quite often, I think Theo can do this, I'm not sure. There's a thing where you can learn the periodic table, but as a rhyme, so that you remember, do you know what I mean? All the elements. Yeah. So we do use it, but we don't use it consistently. We kind of like, it's a bit of a gimmick for things that are really important to remember, and then we drop it and go back to learning by rote.
And that's not optimal for some neurodivergent children.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent now. One thing is, so you know how some of our neurodivergent children don't remember idioms? Mm-hmm. Right. So if you learn French in a classroom, how many French idioms do you learn? So if you went to France and tried to use French idioms and someone said a French idiom to you, you'd be like, that makes no sense.
Yeah.
That makes no sense. So our children who this isn't necessarily, they're at the nuts and bolts stage of communication, and they are learning it rather than being immersed in it the way some children are immersed in it, because their sensory world is very busy. They're not immersed in that back and forth communication in the same way. So they're not picking up those idioms in the same way. They learn communication in a much less, what's the word? It's effortful sometimes to learn spoken communication in that way and use it in that way. And so, at Christmas time, I did notice one of my family members was a bit overwhelmed. And when that child is a bit overwhelmed, they their ability to hide their to use polite conversation goes right out the window. And then people are like, oh, why has that child suddenly become really rude? They haven't. It's just effortful to keep up the pretense of being polite.
100%. Yeah, the effort required to, it's masking, right? It's masking. That's kind of why, I mean, I know I make a joke about it all the time about how sweary I am, and I'm being quite well behaved today, but it does require a huge amount of masking on my part not to F and Jeff completely and permanently, because that's just it's part of my processing. Like, I've just got a potty mouth, I've got a potty brain. Like, I think in obscenities.
Awesome.
But I have to really like rein it in. But I did make a conscious decision, and I do make a conscious decision not to mask that as much as I would, because the effort required to do that makes it so much harder for me to do other things. And I'm like, if you can't manage the occasional F-bomb, you're probably not in the right place anyway, because my content is not going to appeal to you. You're a bunch of dicks. Do you know what I mean? So I kind of have to go with it, but it's part of the unmasking for me. So I'm wondering, this is Amy saying this, made me laugh. I was wondering if your communication mishaps were deliberate demonstration of when neurodivergent kids are not able to take in communication. No, just me not being able to plug microphones in. That's all. Jess says, I once said, for fuck's sake, to a class when I was totally overwhelmed by the knowledge. So I'm wondering what that means, though, because obviously we're talking about for children, and your book is, written from the perspective of someone who's an expert in your field, which is education and learning styles. You've written a book that makes you an expert in your field, apparently.
I don't like the word expert. Let's go with I know stuff. I know some stuff.
You're an expert in this room right now. Okay, let's go with that. You know more about what's in this book than any of us do. That makes you an expert. You wrote the book. You literally wrote the book. But I'm wondering what that means for adults, because like you were saying, we are lifelong learners. So can we speak to that a bit? I know that's not really what your book is.
Okay.
But what does that mean for neurodivergent adults in terms of when we're trying to learn things? I'm thinking about learning to drive. I'm thinking about just like, we want to take on new skill acquisition, or we want to learn a particular thing for our job or our passions. What can that tell us? If we've always thought you learn like this, but actually you might learn like this.
So, there's so much I want to say on this. First of all, I didn't know that I learned the way I do until I had a dyslexia test, and they gave me a piece of writing, and I read it, and then they asked me a question about it, and it was a boring piece of writing, and I was like, I have no idea. I cannot remember. And it was hilarious because I was like, how is that possible? They put it in front of me again. I read it again, took it away. No idea. But I've done a master's, because like you with your spreadsheets, if it's in front of me and I can read it and write it and create it, but I don't have to memorize it, but I can bring the concepts in, brilliant. That is the way I learn. Different people will learn in different ways, but that is, for me, the way that I can do it. And therefore, since then, I've been able to do that kind of learning. When it comes to driving tests.
How many times did you fail your driving test?
Two times. On the third attempt, I had to have my instructor sit in the back and talk to the tester so that it took some of the pressure off. Because just that. So here's one thing. Having something that brings you that sense of comfort, that regulation. So people talking in the background actually regulated me.
Yeah.
Because it was just took the pressure. But when someone was watching, my leg shook so much on the pedal that I bunny hopped up the road, even though I can reverse around a corner now.
I was like, I can drive. Stop putting this guy in the car with me and making me nervous. I can drive.
Imagine what it's like with Ofsted for neurodivergent.
Yeah.
So what happens when Ofsted came in is, so people were like, she's a really good teacher. Ofsted, she'll do really well. Ofsted would come in and watch, and I would just freeze. My communication would go out the window. The fact that I would normally change a lesson if it wasn't going to plan, I just couldn't do it because I was like, I was like a rabbit in headlights.
Yeah.
And all of my coping strategies that are normally there as a neurodivergent teacher, like I'm really confident in the classroom with my children. I love that. I love being with children, love and picking how they learn. Ooh, this is an interesting thing. People who learn the way I do as an emotional experience learner can unpick children's learning profiles and help them to learn. People who don't have that profile don't understand how we do it, so we have to record everything to show them.
Yeah.
Then how could you possibly know that child has learned X, Y, or Z? And I'm like,
I just do. Yeah. Yeah, that's the prime example, isn't it? Of like Ofsted or a learning test is the prime example of what we judge whether something is successful based on how well it can be tested and measured, not based on it actually being successful. I can drive. You can teach. I can't pass a driving test. And you look like a fool in front of Ofsted inspectors.
I had to go in afterwards and go, in normal circumstances in that lesson, I would have done X, Y, and Z. She was like, okay.
Yeah. My God, yeah. So I haven't got to this bit in your book, have you picked out different types of learners then? Are you able to kind of categorize?
So in the book, I do talk about, so it's storytelling. So rather than it being this category, it's storytelling of different profiles. And then at the end, I do have a roadmap for educators and for society of things that we should be looking at. Inference, for example, and the way sensory access and all of those sorts of things. I've done a whole. But what I'm going on to do this month, maybe, is I'm creating
the next 3 days.
Say again.
Next 3 days. Remembering I'm autistic, I take you literally. Or do you mean January?
Around January, February, I'm currently creating. I'm ADHD. Who knows?
It's so funny because this is when I have like that battle between my autism and my ADHD, because my autism is like, tell me precisely, and my ADHD is, don't be a dick. Like, ish is fine, and my autism is like, no,
I don't have. This is how we differ. I don't have the precisely in any way, shape, or form. I'm like, with my book launch, people are like, how did you strategize to do so well? And I was like, I just met people and I said hi and I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I'm really good at planning and strategy. Really good. Like I can plan and strategize and do the whole thing. And then delivery isn't necessarily linked to that planning and strategy. I think it's informed by it, but I'll spend writing plans and strategy documents, and then I'll just do the thing.
So overarching theme, we're not detail. I'm not going to be able. People say to me, you need to have a strategy for X, Y, and Z, and I was like, well, I can have it, but it won't sit in my brain, and I won't remember to look at it. And I've forgotten what we were talking about now. To go back,
I have it. Sorry, I have it because I need it to get the emotional connection to the thing that I'm going to do, and then I do the thing. So the strategy for me is about building in the feelings and the whys and the passion and the drive to do the thing. It's not about and then I'll do this and then I'll do that and then I'll do the other. It's about the unpicking of why am I doing this? Why is this important? Who am I going to be speaking to? What am I going to be saying? So I can then go and do the thing. But as soon as I start the thing, I am at the mercy of the dopamine dragon. And I will only do what my dopamine takes me to. Doesn't matter how well planned it is. And if my demand avoidance gets in the way, it's not happening. Doesn't matter how well planned it is, how perfect the plan was, how well mapped out it was. As soon as the demand avoidance kicks in and the dopamine switches off, it's not going to happen.
And that's a problem with being on social media, because sometimes I'm just like, I'm off. I'm turned off. I'm off, and I can't turn it on until I turn it on again. And there's no point in me showing up and being like, I'm masking if I show up, and I don't want to be masking. Although I don't know what is me masking and what isn't. Sometimes it's
not always that straightforward, is it? It's not always that straightforward. We've got a prompt from Lucia who says, you said the book has a roadmap for educators. That's what you were talking about before I rambled all over you.
Oh, well done. So it has...
It's just like having a prompt in the wings. People
to need this in life.
We need to always have an audience for everything we ever do, of people going, okay, so you said you were going to do this? I'm like, oh, did I? Making toast.
I love it. So yes, at the end, it's not for educators. I think it is actually a society asking for a paradigm shift. It's asking society to validate sensory divergence, to understand that neurosensory divergence needs to be accommodated. It does talk about every area in the book. So identity rejection, how we can support that. And there's such a simple thing we can do in playgrounds. Put things into playgrounds that are not based on speech. So put items into playgrounds where there's building materials, or there's Lego, or there's this, or there's that. Even for older children, it doesn't matter what it is. Like, they have clubs, like card game clubs and stuff. We need things that are non-communication based, because a lot of the rejection happens around that
communication style.
Yeah. And we also need, so one of the things I talk about is educating non-autistic children on autistic communication.
God, yeah.
The way that we info dump, and the way that we also, one of the other things I talk about is neurodivergent empathy. So I'm a mirror empathy. I'm a mirror empather.
A mirror empather. That reminds me of Dr. Heffer from The Man with Two Brains. A mirroring empathizer.
I'm a mirroring empathizer. Thank you. I'm a mirror empathizer. So if you tell me something, so I had to look up what empathy is supposed to look like. And empathy is supposed to be, if someone tells me something, I go, that's how does that feel to you? If somebody empathized with me like that, I'd find it really hard. So the way my friends empathize with me is, oh, I know what that feels like. That happened to me last week, or
it's my trauma.
It's my trauma. But that empathy isn't well understood. It's not seen as a appropriate empathy.
You get told, don't make this about you. This isn't about you. This is about the other person telling you. This is how I build connection with people, by explaining that I understand how that feels, and relating it to a time when it felt like that for me, so that I can put myself in their position and they can see that I understand and they're not on their own. And what's wrong with that?
What's wrong with that? And if I try to do that in school, that, we need that to be understood. And then the other one is cognitive empathy. And if you are, say you think in words, so you think in written words, the way you empathize is going to be very different to a mirror empathizer. You don't think in emotional in that way. So we need to, there'll be more, it will seem like they're removed, their empathy is less empathetic, but that's not the case. It's just different.
The thing I find the most staggering, and I have to remember, and I often am reminded, that for 43 years, I thought that I was atypical. And I mean, I knew deep down that I was different, but I thought I was broken, basically. I thought I was a broken normal person rather than a not broken autistic person. And so I do have a lot of that deep-rooted internalized ableism myself, and I have to really check myself on that stuff, and I'm still learning all of that. And, you know, not for a second do I pretend to understand the experiences of other people, because my experience has been different. But what I think was really interesting during that process was realizing and kind of having a bit of a moment of how ignorant are we, how arrogant are we, that we assume everyone else experiences the world in the same way that we do.
100%.
Like, and that's one of the biggest like challenges and beauties of human interaction, is that you find those places where you interact with the world in the same way as someone else, and that's a place of connection. And then you find a place where someone else doesn't experience the same world in the same way that you do, and that's a place of interest and learning, and that's where growth comes. But there's something about this kind of sweeping generalization that kids learn like this, adults behave like this, empathy looks like this. And it's rubbish. It's absolute horseshit. It doesn't matter what your neurotype is.
So at the beginning of the book, I unpick how this happens and how it's been passed down from generation to generation, and the fact that we still think that all people, you know, it's just not the case. Researchers, there are now neurodivergent researchers who are bringing out research like Damien Milton, double empathy and things like that, that say, look, we're all having a different experience here. We're having different experiences. And I don't like the them and us of typical, not typical, etc.
Yeah.
I think it's just a smorgasbord of differences across, you know, across humans. But we are messy. I'm not going to have the same experience for all sorts of reasons. You know, I'm a brown woman as well, and those had things have had an impact on me. When I was at school, I remember experiencing rejection left, right, and centre for all sorts of the way I communicated, how I was in class, how I interacted with children, just huge amounts of rejection. And that feeds into, of course it does. One of the things I talk about is positive language around neurodivergence. Like, why do we call it a disorder? Why do we talk about deficits? Why do we do these things to children who we know need to hear lots of positive reinforcement? Just like you, I just don't understand why we are still doing it. Once we know better, we should be doing better. And it seems hard.
I agree. And I don't think that, as a rule, educators are doing it on purpose, in inverted commas. I think that people's intentions are wholesome and well-placed. And even when people say ridiculous things to me, I have to remind myself, they believe this. They believe that it's the right thing for kids.
That's the thing, yeah. And when I remember, I'm being very honest here, I remember as an educator being told this child is this way at home and this way at school. And I was I was a lovely communicator, nice with them. But in my head, I was like, are they? And then I had it in my family. I went, yeah, they were 100% experiencing the world completely differently at home, but hugely differently, as in
like a different person.
A different child at home. And this is huge. So one of the fine in school thing that we talk about, you know, they're fine in school. You know, what you're seeing in school is a completely masked child. And I've seen it with my own eyes, what it's like at school and what it's like at home. And I can tell every educator in the world with neurodivergent children, you've got a different child at school to the child you've got at home.
100%. And I know from my own experience, not even thinking about my child, but from my own experience, I was a different kid at home as I was at school. Mm-hmm. I was a grade A, swotty, bookish, very eager to please, like weird, you know, and I struggled with friendships, but I was like the perfect student in school. And I was a fucking demon at home, like an absolute demon. I was, and I know that, but I didn't know that at the time. It wasn't what I didn't know, and I wish I had known, was that was me responding to different environments in a different way. Instead, At school, when I wasn't the perfect grade A student, I was shamed for it because I wasn't trying as hard as I could. And at home, I was shamed for not behaving in a way that I could at school, and what was the matter with me. So, and I didn't know. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't a choice. I was literally responding to what was going on. And my environment and how masked I felt I could be and how exhausted I was from the day at school, that meant that it would spill over at home and vice versa. And it's interesting because I've been engaged in a bit of a Insta fuckery at the moment on a thread where a very big influencer account has posted pictures of wrecked classrooms. And basically, a lot of educators have said, look at what we have to put up with. Look at the mess that these demon children make in our classrooms. And it's really interesting that we're having conversations where teachers are saying, we've got kids dysregulated in school and it's a freaking nightmare. And those same teachers at the same time are saying to parents, well, they're fine in school, when it's flipped.
Yeah. And I think flipping the narrative is where we need to go now, from it being the child is dysregulated to look at what they have to deal with.
Yeah.
Look at how much their identity is expected to be changed. Look at how much their sensory systems are not supported. Look at how difficult they're finding it to learn in the environments that we have, not only the environments, but the way we teach. Look at what they have to deal with. No wonder.
Yeah. Look at all those assumptions that are put on them because someone somewhere has said to another professional, bit of a tricky kid, and everything that follows that child from the moment that is said in a staff room.
So to balance this, we have experienced the best Senkos and teachers and people who have hit it out the ballpark for our children and family members.
Mm-hmm.
But they often have neurodivergent people in their families, so they have that personal experience. But we had a situation where a child from our family went up to another part of another school, and they were expecting a really challenging child. They put an amazing team around that child, and that child has flown. Also, that child got to have 2 mornings a week where they were in a quiet environment being taught in a way that worked for their profile, so they could then transfer those skills to the classroom. That's another thing that I talk about, dual settings for the future. That's the future of education, dual settings, in and out of school opportunities. This is the future of education for neurodivergent children.
And it's exciting, right? Like it'll be a challenge, but what an amazing challenge for our educators to be able to go, okay, we've moved the dial some, but let's really throw all that out and start from scratch. And what could we do now that we know so much more about learning styles and neurodivergence and sensory profiles and trauma responses, and look at what we could actually make happen for all kids, not just for neurodivergent kids. That's exciting.
I think so.
Still trying to turn this massive ship of like literally freaking Gillian Keegan, like the Titanic captain refusing to get off, and she's going to go down with it. Like,
so I think that people can take our books and I would love people to take my book to schools. You know, people are already saying, I'm giving this to the teacher, I'm giving this to the Senko. I want you to take it and give it to as many people, because this explains, and your book explains it from the inside.
yeah,
like what's happening.
Yeah.
And I
agree. And I think that people can do better when they know better. And some educators just don't have the experience of it. And they are, you know, unfortunately, our system as it trains teachers currently trains teachers to mistrust parents and to kind of like position themselves, the education system positions teachers in a place where you do know what's best for these children. You are experts in teaching. Parents are not teachers. Don't let parents tell you how to do your job, you know. And it's not about us telling people how to do their jobs, but it is about us going, I have known my kid for 5 years before you even met them. Let me tell you a bit about my child.
I've been in a meeting where someone from the borough said, and I'm not demonising anyone at all, but someone from the borough said, I know you all care about this child very much, but I am their representative from the borough and I probably know what's best for them. And I thought, you've not met them.
Yeah.
And I don't, like, I do, because I've been a teacher, I think I'm much more of a, right, I've been on that side of the bridge where I didn't even know I was neurodivergent. We talked about that before. I was in my master's. Do you know Jodie Smitten? I trained with Jodie Smitten. And I was there going, yeah, I don't think I'm neurodivergent. This was 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, other members of my family are neurodivergent. I don't think I'm neurodivergent. And then Jordan James came in and started speaking, who was Joe James before, and the autistic photographer. And I went, oh, well, that's me. Oh, what? Hey, and then I turned around to Jodie and I was like, can you do maths? I can't do maths. Maybe I'm neurodivergent. And I'm like, she was just laughing her head off at me the whole time because I was just having this like experience.
And now you're on the other side of that when you're a neurodivergent adult and you're just sat around looking at all the other people as the pennies drop, going, oh, there you go.
All the time. And then all my friends are like, do you think I'm neurodivergent? I was like, well, you couldn't be friends with me if you were.
I forever challenged by wanting to tell people who may not be ready to hear. I've got another friend who just tells them, oh, just so you know, before I go, you're autistic. Bye. You can't do that. Well, you can. Obviously you can. But I do have a lot of conversations with people when I end up going, yeah, you're one of ours. Just like, let me know if you'd like me to give you some reading material. I know it's a lot to process. But yeah, I am. Just when the penny drops.
So what we were saying before is I've been on that side of the bridge and I have been that teacher that hadn't had personal experience, but really cared and really wanted to understand. And I think for teachers who, especially with the narratives that's been there before now, where it's like, you do speech and language, you do an OT, the children, these autistic children need all of these therapies and they need this and they need that. We need to get them up to age-related appropriate points. And it's like, actually, how do you as a teacher extradite yourself from that entire system? Like we are taught to compare children, basically. And that is such a broken system. And I had to do my master's with Luke, the amazing Luke Bearden, for him to undo all of that for me. So that you need to basically
unpick it all.
Unlearning.
And you don't do it until you need to. Right? You don't learn these things until it's like for me, I was like, Christ, I've got an autistic kid. Shit, I'd better learn a shitload about autism as quickly as possible. Like, you know, I was so grateful when I finally made the connection and realized that I was also autistic, because for a while, because of all that stereotyping and all that misunderstanding and all of that misinformation about neurodivergence, it opened a massive gap between me and my child, because I felt there was a disconnect that there hadn't been before, because he was different to me. And I found it really difficult. There was a lot I talk about in my book. There was a lot in there about navigating my way through. I had new information, not a new child, but it was a head fog. I've got to show you this. So Tilly says, they're a qualified social worker. They work in alternative education setting with most students are neurodivergent. In a recent meeting about my own child, the head teacher said, you're just mum. You can't dual role this situation. Yes, but I also can't unknow what I know. And then in a beautiful example of communication and people probably typing at exactly the same time, there's this comment from Claire that says, never trust a social worker. They work for Satan. And I know you don't think that about Tilly Claire. It made me laugh when it came up at exactly the same time on my screen. But I think what's really interesting is that, and I am conscious that I do feed into this narrative, because I was going to say I've never been a teacher. I have worked in classrooms. I was a teaching assistant for about 18 months, and I worked as a behaviour support worker in specialist settings when Theo was younger. Isn't it funny how you're drawn to it even though you don't know? Like,
Definitely.
And I worked as a long-term supply behaviour support worker in a residential setting for assigned male at birth kids who were either looked after children or who had been removed from their home placements. And I would say almost all, if not all of them, were unidentified neurodivergent. And I remember the conversations from those staff rooms and the way that the adults who were tasked with caring for those children spoke about those children. And so I think because of that, biased and defensive on behalf of those kids when I'm talking to educators, because I have heard those conversations firsthand and it's horrific. And I have friends who work in special education, and even they will sometimes say things and I'll be like, have you forgotten you're speaking about a child here? You know, the language, the vocabulary that really dehumanizes children who are struggling.
Well, I think that's a societal thing, because when you think of workplaces, when you think of any institution where someone is divergent and interacting divergently, there's a lot of judgment that's rained down on that throughout society. So it's not just in education. I think it's a societal thing. And I do think that, like, we just need to shift the narrative.
Yeah, we do. We do. And we need, and I was saying to you before we came on together, like in the past, my book came out on the 7th of January last year. So in the past 12 months, not that my book is the benchmark for everything else, but I do have life before book and life after book, which you will have now. But since my book came out last year, the number of books that have come out as well that speak to this.
Yes.
There are probably more books that have come out in the last 2 or 3 years about neurodivergence than there were for the previous decade. And I think that that's part of shifting the narrative.
100%.
And sorry, go on, you were saying, sorry, go on.
That's all right.
And I think it's really important that we get these experiences in front of policymakers, decision makers, you know, the powers that be. Because that's where the change has to happen, right?
Yeah. And one thing that I did want to say is we went through a private assessment at the beginning of our journey. And the private assessor was very old-fashioned, and they assessed the child as having global delay and all sorts of things. And because I'd had access to advocates, because I'd had access to people speaking about neurodivergence, because I had had that access very early on in our journey, I was able to turn around to people and say, you do not need to believe what's just been told to us, because I don't believe it.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have had that ability if I hadn't have had access to this narrative to be able to bat it away and say, actually, you know, the thing that I talk about is coming back to our neurodivergent intuition.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's what we need to do and be talking about and be talking to.
100%. And we need to empower, you know, ultimately it's teachers who spend more time. If your kids are in school, teachers spend more waking time with your children than you do for a lot of the year. And whilst I make a joke about, you know, like teachers hate me, not all teachers hate me. And I get lovely messages from teachers saying, I've read your book, and it really changed the way I think. And, you know, I get it's, you know, we're not going to be for all people, are we? We've got to find different ways in. But I think if we can put in front of people who are grown-ups and intelligent human beings, look, this isn't working for a lot of the children that you're caring for. What if you looked at it like this and open that door for them? I think a lot of teachers would storm through that door if they felt empowered to be able to do it.
I actually think they're crying out for it, because these teachers who are saying this is hard, they're not wrong.
No.
It's hard to have children in a classroom environment that are not where the classroom environment is not suited to that child, and there's no other alternative. That is hard on those teachers. So I'm not like they don't some the way some people speak about it is not appropriate. We know that.
Yeah.
But acknowledging that, yeah, it's not right. It's not right for the teachers, and it's not right for the children.
No, everyone's getting screwed over.
Yeah.
No one's winning here. I mean, the people that are winning are the academy trusts that are making money out of education. Now, education in our country has been turned into a business, a commodity.
Yeah.
And our children are
Suffering.
Disposable pieces of data that make money for education trusts. Don't even get me started on multi-academy trusts. We'll be here all day.
I know all about this, but we'll not do this.
I am excited by the prospect of how we could make changes in education. And I think it's time. I think there's a lot of work to do. It's like the work of organizations like Square Peg and books like yours that are really challenging that. And it's deciding where you're going to sit. Like, I'm kind of like, I make a lot of noise, and I make myself impossible to ignore as that like gobby northern bird that says the F word too much, because I know that gets me seen and heard. And then that hopefully, like cracks a door open for people who really know what they're doing with regards to policy change to come in round the back and use that as a bit of, look at all these people talking about this on social media because this random woman from Wakefield goes on about it all the time. Your electorate should be listening to her. You might need to give this some attention. But that it's a combined approach, right? We've got to kind of like, and at the same time, we've got to do what we can to support those children and people that are in the system now who are suffering because the system is not fit for them. So, we've got to try and take a multi-pronged approach, right?
Yeah. I think bringing people together, because I think there's lots of people doing work all over the place. There's advocates everywhere.
Yeah.
But I think a combined approach.
I agree. And I think it's time, and I'm hopeful. I mean, let's get the Tories out and then take it from there. That's not a bad start, right? Your New Year's resolution to not vote Tory. So not one more thing, but I did ask you at the beginning of this, if you're going to share with people like a thing for some people to take away, like I know it's got like a lot of pages in it.
Yeah, I know.
140.
It is. There's a book buddy that goes alongside it. There's videos.
Oh, nice.
So at the beginning, when you buy the book, you can access some videos, which means you can dip in and out of the book.
I love that. Oh, here it is, a book buddy. Nice. Yeah. So you can download it and then it just gives you like because you understand that people learn in different ways. See?
It's got subtitles and you can go on, and so it's got some of the main thematic
nice.
To help with accessibility. I do want to do an audiobook. People keep asking me, that's further down the line, and I do want to do some training videos and things. It's all coming. It's all in the pipeline. But the thing that I would really like people to take away with them is you can look at the way your child is accessing the world through their sensory system and think about the ways that we can validate that experience. I know lots of parents are already doing that. Validating autistic and neurodivergent children's experiences as much as we can, because they don't get that all the time.
God, so true. And actually that's a way to reduce trauma, to reduce alienation, to reduce isolation. I think one of the main protective factors for me as a child was that I had a parent who told me a lot. You're marvelous. They don't understand you. They don't know what they're talking about. There's nothing wrong with you.
So I have actually produced, I didn't even think of this. I've produced some cards. I'm so rubbish at telling people about things I have.
Don't talk about my friend like that. You're not rubbish.
I've created some affirmation cards that actually talk about neurosensory divergence at the front of them. And then they have affirming things for neurodivergent children on them. So they're on my website. And there's cards that say, I need to move my body more. It's okay. I can feel proud of myself. Or I learn in a different way. I can feel really proud of the way that I learn in my brain.
I love that.
Things like that.
I'm going to put a link to your website just now, but tell me what it is so I can find it for people. I've just put Helen Daniel into Google, and I've got a character from Neighbours.
Helen Daniels.
And now I can't concentrate.
I used to have to tell people that I'm Helen Daniels, and I lived in Ashby-on-Sea, and people thought I was just making stuff up on the phone.
I found it. It's outsidetheboxsensory.com, isn't it? Actually, right. I'm going to put it up on screen. I'm going to put up the title of the book. So for people who don't yet have a copy, it's available on Amazon. And you can get it in bookshops as well, can't you? No, not yet.
Yeah, Waterstones. It's on Waterstones.
Waterstones. That's a bookshop. I know it's not a physical book. Last time I looked, Waterstones is a bookshop. You get it online on Waterstones. You can get it in hardback and in paperback. Is that right?
Say that again.
Hardback and paperback.
Hardback, paperback, and on Kindle.
Nice. And get your book buddy. And then, okay, so this is Helen's website, outsidetheboxsensory.com, where you can go and have a look at all of her work and the things that she's got, including those flashcards, which sounds amazing. And I know that people will be asking you this because they've been asking it me for the past year. What's your next book going to be about? So
I think it's probably going to be about the ADHD and ADHD experience.
Nice. Okay. Thank you for coming. It's so nice. I'm sorry for like the whole.
Oh, I love it.
Unplugging things, plugging things in. I've got a proper sweat on. I'm having a bit of a tropical moment. But people can come and find you on your website, yes, and they can come and get your book. Please go get the book. It's a great book. And we were talking about it before, and what Helen and I didn't realize before we both launched books is that we both thought, I think I'm right, I don't think I'm speaking for you, we thought that books just sell. That's not true. Like there are hundreds of thousands and thousands and thousands of books. And if you want people to make work like this, you need to go and support it. Even if you're not going to read it because you're not a reader, because maybe you might just dip in and out of it and you might just use the book buddy, please go and get a copy. Because if people buy the book, it stays nice and high on the Amazon charts, and then more people see the book. And that's vital because people can't buy it if they don't know it exists. So yeah, go and get a copy of Neurosensory Divergence, Autistic Languages, A Roadmap to Equitable Life for Autistic Children by Helen Daniel. It's a cracking book. And yeah, please go get it. Please go support it. And then go and find Helen. And I'm really bad at wrapping things up as well. So
I don't know. I don't ever know. I'm over on Instagram at OTB Sensory. That's where I'm mostly.
Yeah.
I have a little group. Go on.
I just thought of something else I wanted to say to people before we go, but now I'm finding it. So go on. You've got a group.
Over on Facebook. I'm not as active as I should be on there, but I'm going to be this year. That's one of my things to do. And yeah, I'll be putting more stuff on my website. So
amazing. And if you're not already on my website, please go to this link and come and join mailing list. Go to this link, come and join my mailing list, because I've got some free stuff coming in the coming month. In January, I'm running a webinar on how to use artificial intelligence to crack off complaint letters in less than an hour. I know, you're welcome. And I've also got a guest slot in January. I've got some other stuff coming, and I'm rolling out a new group program at the beginning of February. So get yourself on my mailing list. If you want to work with me, this is the way to do it. So please go and get on my mailing list, and you'll get mailers from me that are probably I mean, they're a little more civilized than I am, but today's mailer did use the word perineum in it, so you're welcome. So yeah, thanks for joining me. Go and enjoy the rest of your New Year's. Are you doing anything nice on that there New Year's Eve?
A nice, calm, neurodivergent New Year's Eve.
Nice. I'm thinking about going to the pictures. I think it'd be quiet. I want to see Wonka.
We went to see Wonka. It was emotional.
Was it? Okay. In a good way?
Yeah, in a good way. It was just, there was some peril, and neurodivergent children and peril can be a bit, I'm leaving, I'm staying, I'm leaving, it's lovely, I'm leaving.
Yeah, that could be me also. But I like to go to the pictures. I take a bag with a big fluffy blanket in it and a multi-pack size bag of Maltesers and eat my own body weight in chocolate. And I don't care. I'm like, I paid for a ticket. You can't throw me out. I brought my own sweets and my own blanket. Fuck you. So, yeah. Yes, right. So I will end the broadcast and then you stay and I'll say goodbye to you properly, but I'm going to say goodbye to people that are on the broadcast now. Goodbye, people on the broadcast. See you all later.